Welcome back to the show. This is the Voices of Healing podcast. I'm your host, Tina Clark. Today I have Tim Nelson with us. He's a professional photographer and he's gone through quite a bit with his spiritual journey. So today we're going to focus on one aspect of that. And what I think is really important is being able to release emotions, especially in terms of crying. So I have a lot to say about this topic. I know that Tim does too. So I just wanted to welcome you to the show and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Tina. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so tell us a little more about yourself and when did your spiritual journey begin? And we'll take it from there.
So yeah, I'm 47. I've lived in the same small town for most of my life, and simple person, I guess, to say the least. But I think over the years, through bad relationships, or like everyone, bits of trauma, we put walls up. We start protecting ourselves, and I don't think we even know it. It probably seems like a good idea at first, and then we realize that we're don't have the ability to connect or feel in the ways that we used to, maybe as kids or whatever. So I realized I knew I had a wall up for a long time through relationships. Like that's the words we would use, and it seemed acceptable. Like, oh, just got a wall up. It's okay. But I ended up getting married, and through that marriage, I started realizing, that I really just couldn't feel like I remembered. And my ex-wife was very emotional. She could feel a lot, so it was very glaring to me, the difference between the two. And at the time, I knew nothing about spirituality really. That was woo-woo stuff, let's just say, or whatever. And there was religion, but it wasn't like I was seeking out. And I didn't hear stories of people who were doing things to bring these walls down or anything like that. So I didn't seek that out. I wanted to be different than I was, but I didn't know how, I guess. And subsequently, after we ended up getting the divorce after like 8 years, that was a hard time. Like for anybody, you lose people that are around you all the time, and kids, are dispersed. And I think at that time I was searching for betterment. And I was looking to just be developing myself in different ways, with people and whether it was sales or business or whatever. But I sought out to just better myself. And through those, I started learning a lot about people and how people could have, almost like instincts, like we can be pulled along and we don't even know it. Right. And, you can see how that works in marketing and different things. And I ended up meeting somebody who was very spiritual. And through that journey, I ended up reading books that I had never read. Some were like witchy, or, some were spiritual. And, I had read a book on the ego before, but that didn't really translate. But I ended up doing ayahuasca. And through all those processes, I realized that I was not breaking my wall down, but I was feeling more connected to people, right? And because of the books I was reading, I was seeing things in people, and I just saw a lot of brokenness around me, right? Like I felt like I just saw pain and suffering everywhere. And after the ayahuasca, I think that's what it was. I ended up having like a connection to like nature, let's just say, and people and everything. I just had an innate love for people. And weirdly enough, I started having like a soft spot for villains, right? And which was very weird to have. And I tried to explain that to people, and they could not understand. But I saw villains through a trauma lens, right? And I was realizing that they're villains most likely because some traumatic stuff happened to them, and they didn't know how to deal with it. So they're doing terrible things. And I thought at that point, like, man, I'm really back. Like I feel, right? I feel for people, and I see all this stuff. But that really wasn't it. I continued on my journey, reading different books and different things. And I read a book all on emotions, and you get some epiphanies. But I ended up meeting someone again, and you get perspective, I guess, from different relationships. And for some reason, subsequently, when I met this person, I feel like things started happening again, like spiritual leaps, if you will. And one of those was emotions. And I thought I had a full emotional capacity at this time. And then all of a sudden, I would just find myself just like feeling so deeply. And I would find myself, I would cry and just, I wouldn't know why, because I wouldn't be thinking of negative thoughts or anything like that. It might just be I don't even know. It's hard to say. They would just come in waves, and I would just have these moments, and they'd just be gone. I felt crazy for a little while, and people couldn't relate, right? Because people who don't have emotions can't relate to that. And people who have had emotions all the time don't know what it's like to just have them, right? So I felt misunderstood. I don't know. I didn't know what was going on with me, but I ended up doing Reiki one time for my first time, and I felt like I felt like it would help me, like move something or something. And when I did have Reiki, it broke something loose. And at that point, I was bawling almost the entire time that Reiki was happening. And subsequently, it's interesting because even those ladies that were doing it, they didn't know what to do, right? Like you could tell that they didn't expect what was happening to happen. They,
Mm.
they, and I don't know all Reiki clients and sessions, right? But they were like, oh, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. And because it was like a free clinic, I think there were some other people near there, right? But I didn't care, right? Like I had already come to terms that,
Yeah,
hey,
you're like,
I
I'm in
already
it.
tried sometimes, right? It's fine. And I'm not like ego about it. I didn't care. Like I already found, I was connected. So I was happy in a way, but I did feel it was maddening, and I didn't know why. But I bawled for like 15 minutes after that session, just driving, calling a friend. I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. And she's like, just let it all out, let it go and everything. And the wildest part about having those emotions break through is seeing how people don't know how to handle it. And especially from a man. And listen, it's not like right now I just start bawling, right? It's not like I'm out in public and just cry, and it's not weird like that. And not that that's weird, but it just doesn't happen randomly. But when it does, when I just talk about it sometimes to people, they don't know what to do with it. And it's interesting because women a lot of times are typically more emotionally connected, are available than men. But through a lot of what I witnessed is that they didn't know what to do, right? Like even if I was just talking about it, it was like they didn't understand where I was coming from because so many men are just closed off and, masculine or whatever, however you want to frame the word, societal norms don't allow or don't normally have this behavior. And I saw people get turned off by it just talking about it, not crying, just talking about emotional openness and connectivity and speaking about how I could cry. And I met a lot of people, women that also have walls or whatever, and they can't cry, and they didn't understand, how I don't know how I got there, but um
Well, it was like over time, you were opening more up, and all of these modalities were helping you get in touch with your feelings so much that you couldn't hold them back anymore.
yeah, no, and I didn't even realize I was holding it back, you know. And now I welcome it in a way. Before, if I ever got to where I would cry like terribly, something terrible has happened, right? A death, something terrible. And it would always have like a residual. You would feel it, like feel heaviness. And I don't ever feel that. Like now I could bawl out and just be done with it. And it's like I feel better. And I didn't feel bad to begin with. It's hard to even explain, but um as our energy moves through us, emotions, I think, is one of the biggest gifts we have as humans. And if our souls are here, which I believe to have experiences and learn lessons, let's just say, and there's really no way to do that without input, right? And the way to receive these emotions and have these experiences, and to think that so many people, because of societal norms, will block that off. It's not right, or I'm too much, or this, that, and the other thing. And you're just like missing out on this whole thing of life when you can experience it in these ways, good, bad, funny, indifferent. So like I'm connected to my emotions in a way that I'm thankful for at this point.
You know, it's so interesting because I was the opposite. Like growing up, I would cry over anything. See, that was my go-to response. Like I'm unhappy, I'm frustrated, upset, I'm overwhelmed. I would cry. And then I got to my 20s. I said I need to find a way to cope with things without always crying. So I learned to calm myself down. And if I get really worked up, it's like physically bad for me,
Yeah.
you know? So I think I got it out of my system because I got to a point where I don't cry that much anymore. Um, but I think that crying is really important, especially, I have Reiki clients, and they cry even before we get on the table.
Okay.
And I just think it's because my space is very accepting and safe. And when people feel safe to share and feel like they're not going to be judged, that's when they share the deepest part of themselves, and then they cry, which is fine. I have tissue box in my office and I'm ready to hand out the tissues. And I always tell them, don't hold back, don't apologize.
And what you said there, as far as, if you let this life build up, it's not good for you. And I feel like in a lot of ways that I'm on the other end of that spectrum now, to where I just allow it to go through. Like I can just gonna be done with it, right? And it's just like gone. And I think that if I have a time to where I would hold that in and not, for whatever reasons, that it's in there, still, and it can build up. And I think that people don't realize how emotions, being energies of sorts, can just continue to build and build and build and build. And that's when crazy stuff starts happening, like irrational decisions and all these other things, is when you are holding things in and not letting the things be known. I'm a very transparent person for the same reasons. As this has been going on, like my communication has got to a level that most people aren't used to, because I can just talk about things and discuss like how I'm feeling. And if I don't do those things, I feel like it's starting to build up.
Yeah.
And it's
So
not
you
good.
just have more awareness now. And growing up, like everybody was uncomfortable with me.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? Because I've always been a really big feeler, and I've always been like a very passionate person, and I was not able to hide my emotions. Even if I tried, the more sensitive ones would feel it. So, I mean, I'm used to people being uncomfortable about that.
And it's interesting because like we're humans, right? And like it doesn't matter where you're from or what you believe in, like everyone has emotions and we feel them similarly. And to think that those are embarrassing is like, where did we go wrong to convey that? Like we should be ashamed of having feelings, like that's an opinion, essentially. Like we're processing something and emoting through that. And how can that be something that it should be shunned?
Well, I don't know your childhood was like, but I felt like I couldn't really speak about things or show my emotions, especially if they were considered negative, like anger or being upset. I was basically shut down. And so, you grow up that way, you learn right away what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and then you learn to bury it. So, I'm not trying to blame my parents or anything, but it is what it is. That's what my experience was like. And I'm sure even for males, the term, stop crying, don't cry about it, those kind of commands, we learn to stuff it all in. And it's really, really bad for us
Mhm.
because all those emotions, all illness has an emotional root.
Absolutely.
Any issue you have, anything, there's an emotion and there's a root cause of it. And so if you're stuffing that down and pretending it's not there, it's still there, everybody. It's not going anywhere.
Anyway, and like you said, there is a lot of, like, as a boy coming up, there's a lot of things, people will say, don't be like a girl, or don't do this, or don't do that, or button up, or I'm gonna give you something to cry about, or all kinds of things. And ultimately I had conflict around childhood, not my childhood, but trying to figure out how I got to where I am, because I would say my childhood was great, right? In the way that I had divorced parents, but it was since I was born almost, right? So I never knew different. I didn't suffer from that divorce, and I just got two sets of great people on both sides. And I didn't live with my dad, so I was always around my mom, my aunt, my grandmas, and everything. So I probably was in an emotionally safe space, and I don't recall a lot of that from my parents and things. And I think it wasn't until I got out and had a car and got a girlfriend, and then my, being openness that I probably was as a child, I felt like I got broke down relationships after relationships, and then I became this more cold-hearted, callous person that I thought people must have to be, to survive. And I did suffer. I mean, I had a much more suffering though after childhood till adult. Like this whole section of life was emotionally terrible for me. And so it's coming out of that. It wasn't really childhood. So I kind of developed it like I probably on 17 on, is when it started really kicking me down. And yeah, I can't remember what you said at the end there, but holding them in, gotta let them out.
Yeah, and back to the relationships, I feel like relationships are our biggest teachers. Like everybody's teaching us all the time, actually. But their mirror, usually we tend to want to bond with someone that will reflect our trauma back to us, actually. So
Yeah.
that's why relationships are so difficult. They're mirrors for each other. We're mirrors for each other, and it's a mirror of the shadow.
Mm. And it's interesting in that regard when it comes to good communication, right? Because I've meet people who will open up, right? When you can communicate with them, and they, like you said, they feel safe, and a lot of people won't talk, right? Like a lot of people just won't. I hear people all the time in relationships 20 years and this, that, and everything, and they don't know each other, like really. And I think that allowing somebody to open up, you start uncovering these layers. And I think fear comes up a lot of times, like we can be in a situation to where we put ourselves to get these traumas mirrored back to us. But then when you start facing them and you start talking about them, it gets really ugly for a little while, because now it's like inherent. And we all know how it is when you know something, right? When it feels like the truth to you because of past experiences, it's hard to talk that logic down, and that doesn't make it right. But everything that we have been witnessed says it is. And that's how trauma is so nasty to people. Um, I've been labeled as a terrible person in the eyes of a traumatic person from being a good person, right? Because a good person one time hurt them, or somebody who was acting a good way, right? If that makes better sense. And the behaviors were a trigger to them. And they would much rather have somebody who wasn't good to them, because at least they know. And I have actually done the same thing when through my divorce, when I wanted to isolate myself a little bit, and I only really allowed myself around people who weren't bad people, but I knew them in and out, right? And I knew no matter what, they couldn't surprise me. And I think it hurt me in some ways because I probably would have been better suited to be around people who would nurture me. But really, I just wanted some safety through trust kind of thing. And these people weren't great people, but I knew them in and out. So it made me feel safe. And, that sounds terrible saying out loud, that
I
we,
don't think that's terrible. I mean, that's how you feel safe. So you wanted to be around people you really knew.
well, these people had hurt me several
Mm.
times, both of them, right? And I knew they couldn't through what I knew now, but it just was, to me, it felt safe. And I felt like it was the right decision. And I think that when it comes to trauma, though, that's what people do subconsciously. Like you said, they look for people who will give them something that they know, but they don't even know that they're doing that. So then they get the same thing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah, and so that's when you learn boundaries,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
boundaries are real tricky because people don't use them, right? So when people start throwing boundaries around, it sounds very, line in the sand, which it is. But people aren't used to dealing with. If you went around every day and said something to somebody and drew a line in the sand after you said it, they would feel threatened. You know what I mean? But they would get it. Like, no, I don't allow this. You do that
And
again.
some people don't listen either. Like you try to communicate with them, this doesn't make me feel good. I don't, please don't do this. And they just don't listen. And that's when you have to end the relationship.
Yeah. And it's hard when you have, you feel like you have a connection, Emotions are a wild thing.
Yeah.
It's still a mystery to me because I don't understand it fully. I just know I have them again, which I am proud of. But yeah, on this one.
I believe for years that feelings are our connection to our soul.
Mhm, 100.
And that I've been practicing for years, feeling my way through life now. Like I always ask, how do I feel about this? And even if I'm feeling fear, that's not necessarily bad.
Mm,
It means, why am I feeling fear about this? Because deep down inside, I really want it and I'm afraid to go after it.
mhm.
So feeling fear is not necessarily meaning a no.
Right.
A no might, I think, actually is neutral. I don't care about that, you
Yeah,
know?
no, a no doesn't have to be a bad thing. I used to love no. I sold cars and I learned to love no. Like that was something I needed in my life at the time. People were going to say no more than they said yes, and I had to embrace that. And at that time of my life, I was free in a lot of ways because of that alone. And I've lost that. It's a practice thing, I think. But yeah, no is a definite. It's an easy thing to do. It's when
Yeah, one of the things that I was blocked was my throat chakra, and I wasn't very good at asking for what I wanted, even if it was like more tartar sauce for my shrimp. Seriously, I wouldn't ask it. And I realized I need to stop doing that. I need to ask for what I want, and people are allowed to say yes or no or maybe. And so I started practicing that a lot more. And now I do it out of habit. Like I always ask for what I want. I'm not unreasonable. It's like reasonable things.
right.
And now if I get a no, I'm actually shocked. I'm like, really? No? Okay. And then I just step back and say, well, I guess that's not meant for me.
You think that you used to not ask it because of like fear of rejection, or like fear of like just something?
Yeah, the people pleasing and the situation in my childhood is, I was trying to stay out of trouble. And so, was the good girl and got the straight A's. And so I was not ever taught asking for what I want was something I could do. I was always accommodating everybody else, but not asking for what I really wanted.
Hmm, yeah. It must have been so freeing there for a while to be doing that. Once you conquer that, and you're like, look at me go. And then what did you experience? You experienced everybody saying yes for a bit,
Yeah.
to where it was a surprise when they started saying no.
Yeah, you think the waitress cares if she has to get more tartar sauce? I mean, this is ridiculous, but yeah, and it still thrills me to this day when I get the yes, because in the past, I wouldn't even ask.
Mm. Yeah, it's important to ask for what we want, and I think I think a lot of people do what you did in different ways. It's just that we're reserved. We're a little just a portion of us is being put away for whatever reason, and we might not even realize how much that's taking from us. And being our true selves. I'm sure you felt a lot of power and strength after you got going with that, feeling like it wasn't a thing. You just did it then.
Oh
You know.
yeah, it was like now if I get a no, I'm like, really? No? Really? A no? And I don't get upset about it because people have a right to say no.
That's right.
It's up to them. Um, but yeah, so if you were to give advice to someone about connecting with their feelings or releasing their feelings through crying, for a beginner, where do you even begin?
Well, I think at first we have to realize that a lot of times we might not be because of societal norms, right? And that's difficult to go against those things. But I mean, I think everyone would note that the world is changing. And I don't know if it's changing as much as it is just loosening up, right? Like it felt like it kind of was a way, and then we probably made it into a way, and now it's probably going back to more of the way, right? And that way is probably more of individuality, more of connectivity, and all those. But still, society says, that's weird in a lot of ways, at least Americans, for the whole part. And I think that, like a man might be embarrassed to cry, or a woman might cry and feel like she's too much. A kid might cry and feel like they're going to get in trouble. All these different things. But I think that the first step would be, through me, I think it started coming through. I started embracing shame and I can't think of the other word now. Anyways, but I got it through Brene Brown, right? So Brene Brown was about shame and
Vulnerability.
vulnerability, right? So, but
Yeah.
vulnerability and shame is really what I started doing before it started happening on its own, right? But I just started trying to be more vulnerable to people, to tell them how I feel, or talk about things that I had done that had brought me shame, to help other people see that I had too. And through those things, I didn't cry, but I think that those things allowed me to start brushing off some of the stuff that holds it down. And then that just allowed me to feel more seen and feel more understood. And I think that those things are important. So people started responding to me slightly different at that time, but then when it comes down to, why are we going to cry? Are we sad? Like everyone understands this, right? Like everyone understands this. So at that time, if you feel like if I cry, they're going to say something about it, that's an issue that might need to be looked at, right? Like, why are you holding yourself back because this person might feel that you're not supposed to be crying right now, or you're less than a man, or whatever. So I think a lot of it probably is just doing it, which is dangerous feeling. Like it's not going to feel safe at first. You're going to feel like people are going to judge you, I imagine. And to which I say, as we get older, we don't have to keep the people that are around us. And if you're being held down by people who won't allow you to be you, like that's another thing that you maybe should look at. And it might not come up until you realize that, hey, I can't even cry around this person without them making me feel like I shouldn't be. But they would want, like everyone does it. I imagine, and sometimes, even if it's in the privacy, people feel the tears might not come, but the pain is inside of us. So as I say, shame and vulnerability was the first thing I did. And then it was kind of a over time an acceptance of other people's behavior. Like I didn't care. It got to the point. So when it was happening, when I didn't want it to happen, I would leave my house in the morning. I used to go on these sunrise walks, and I would sometimes just bawl out in the morning in the car. And I was like, you know what? I'm not even wiping these tears away. I'll let everybody see. Right. And then there was this little, like you're in your car protection, like you can do the things in the car. So I had that little bit of protection, although people could see me, I felt a distance. And I think it was just a practice. And like I said, I am not falling apart in public. That's not what's happening. But what it is happening is if I feel emotions and tears subsequently come with that, I don't try to stuff them down. I think that is one of the worst things that we can do, because the tears are a manifestation, if you will, of the energy releasing, right? And to stuff all that down, it's like, if you can see yourself doing that, that's not healthy, right? Like, you're not dealing with something and you're putting it for later, but the later only comes with other stuff now that you've already stacked on time, but who knows what's going to happen then? And some people still won't break that out. They'll just suffer ulcers, sickness, all types of things come with it. I'm more shame, more, all these things can come with that. So I say, just be honest and open.
I say, if you're an adult male, like, cry
it out.
Please be the role model. Please make it more normal.
That's right.
More normal. And I think it always starts with you, like, being true to your own feelings, and not being ashamed of them, not allowing someone else to control you, whoever this person, because they're uncomfortable. Because we each have to own and take responsibility for our reactions. That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned, is I'm not responsible for your reaction to me, unless I'm trying to trigger you or abuse you. But if I'm just trying to have a conversation or be a normal person and you're reacting badly to it, that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people react badly to me and I don't even know why. I'm like, I must be stirring something up in this person, but I don't know what it is. It could be a total stranger, and this is not mine. This is not my responsibility.
That's right. And they might not even know. There might be something that they haven't worked out and they're just responding in a way that they think they should. And they might feel shame about that later. Right. And that's the bad part about us not being authentic and genuine, is that we're just doing what we think other people think we should. And there's not a large number of people who aren't in some way. Nobody's like 100% happy. I don't want to say nobody, because happiness is out there. But we live in a society where there is a lot of people who are sad, who have smiles on their face. And they have the smiles on their face because they know everyone thinks they should, and they can't deal with it because people, aren't allowed. So I say, if there's going to be a public service announcement, allow yourself to have feelings. If you're not feeling, I would look into that. Like I said, I did some books, I did some meditating and all these things, and I realized that not feeling what had been affecting my life. And it took time for me to see the clarity of that. Like I was hurting people and myself. So I just looked for a little bit and looked into it. And that was some self-discovery I think a lot of people would probably benefit from doing. And then, build a tribe of people who accept you for who you are and lift you up, instead of saying hold you down. And if you can't even emote without being, pointed at and ridiculed, how could you do anything, right? Like, what is acceptable to other people? And does it matter? It does not.
It varies so much, and it's not your responsibility.
Not at all.
Yeah. So, we need to stop stuffing ourselves down. That's why we have a mental health crisis in this country.
Exactly.
We go back to the heart. We need to stop ignoring the heart and get out of your heads. Please get out of your heads.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Mexico?
I have not.
The reason why I love Mexico is because I can feel the heart energy there.
Really?
And then I go, my God, when I go back to the US, it's all thinking, and mental. Where's the heart energy?
What do you think it is culture-wise that separated that?
I think it might be because of the indigenous people down there, are more in touch with their heart and the practices of being connected to the earth. Um,
It's easier to understand people, I find, with the emotional capacity, and because and on the baseline of it, you have the different emotions, which happiness, love, sadness, anger, all these different things. We understand these things, right? Like they're so understandable. We all have it. So we know what it looks like to emote in certain ways, like anger, right? And I think that we can agree that people who maybe let their frustrations out a little bit at a time when they happen aren't going to explode, right?
right.
Same thing with sadness, right? All these things, you just let it out as it happens because it is an energy, and don't hold it, because if you hold it, you might fall apart. This might spin you down in some kind of crazy tailwind of depression and everything else, and a lot of that could be avoided through crying up till before then, letting it out, and just kind of letting yourself be. We're just here to
I
feel it.
mean, all those people who are driving around in their cars aggressively and getting angry at
Oh,
every person that cut them off,
mhm.
that's
Hold it.
that's misplaced anger. You are angry about something, but it's not that driver, and you
No.
need to figure out what it is.
Hmm. And those people are normally not typically violent. They're not going to do something violent, but then they are, and then they do, right? Because they've allowed
Yes.
themselves to get into those states, and the
You get
ego.
into a state where you're out of control, and that's not good for anybody.
Yeah, and we can get out of control through all types of different emotions. There's always a level, which is funny to say when we're talking about, we're living life and we should be our true selves. And there's always a threshold of too much violence. I don't know if there's too much happiness, but I imagine if you went around whistling and happy, everybody would be mad at you if you were happy all the time. They wouldn't understand it. You would have less friends probably if you're the happiest person.
Yeah, you really do. And, like, I'm thinking about this girl in middle school, and every morning she would come in and say, "Good morning, everyone." And we'd all groan. You'd be like, "Oh, why are you
Feel
so
great,
happy?"
right?
You know? But, it's actually takes less energy to be happy. The other stuff takes more of your energy. It's an energy sucker.
I was the happiest I had been almost, and it's hard to say because so much awesome things have happened in my life in different ways. But over the last little bit of time, I felt the happiest I ever had, and nothing was going on. Business wasn't great. I didn't have any relationships. My kids and I were not seeing eye to eye. There was nothing going on, but I just was so happy, and I think it was because I was just fine with now, right? And I was allowing my emotions to be free, and I lost the fear of death through that, because I'm just living, right? Like, how can you even be afraid to die and don't live at the same time? You know what I mean? That's almost like saying, well, I'm not living yet, so I'm afraid to die in case I start. You know what I mean? But I kind of lost that, and I don't want to die, right? I want to see all my friends and my kids and my family and everybody, and I want to experience life. But I just when I was happy, it didn't matter to me because I was here experiencing, and I felt like that was what I'm supposed to do. So I was just doing what I was supposed to do, and I was happy for that. Sure, I could have got even better and happier in more moments, but it was hard to wrap my head around as I was feeling this happiness.
When I have those moments where I just feel happy, I make sure I tell somebody.
Yeah,
Usually it's my husband, but I'll tell him, I'll be like, "I feel really happy right now." And he doesn't ask me why or what happened. It's just that's how I feel.
it just comes sometimes. Do you know what it's
Yeah.
about? Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I don't know. It's just like sometimes you feel sad and you don't know why. And I want to touch in on that too, because some of us are feeling collective feelings that are not ours.
I talked to a friend about that, and I had an answer that they didn't like, but she was upset about some things that were going on in the world. And she was talking to me, and she was like, how could you not, feel these ways? And I was like, well, the problem is that I'll feel too much about that. Right. And I was like, there's a billion things going on in the world. and I could focus on any of it. And I was like, right now, people say that I help them in little bits of ways, this way and the other way, and it's because that I am who I am, I guess, right? But if I go digging for the most sorrowful things to look at, I will diminish in a way that I can't help anyone, right? So it's like my awareness to that allows me to stay at a better state for myself and others by not delving into the woes of things that I can't control. You see what I'm saying? Like, I can only do what I can do. I can fight for a cause, but if I can't make change immediately, if that fight is going to take me out of the game completely, I have to reevaluate that. And I think that as far as the up and downs of it all, not just society, it's like natural. There's nothing in the earth that doesn't go up and down. Everything is vibrating at all times. So it's like a known that things will be. If it's the best day you ever had, we can say that it won't always be, right? And if it's the worst day you ever had, same thing. It's not always going to be this way. It's going to go back and up, but it's the way that we handle what's happening to us that will keep us down or up. And I guess what I was just saying, that's how I stay up sometimes. I don't necessarily have blinders on, but again, there's 10 billion things happening. And then if I have to deal with the real meat of terrible things, I still can't be my best self if I go all the way down in those emotional scale, right? So I can still be thankful for being alive. I can still be thankful for all these things which will bring me up and allow me to help people. Now, I'll still cry about sad things, but again, you let it out and you move forward.
Yeah, like stop watching the news.
I don't watch news for sure.
There's always something happening in the world to be sad about, to be depressed about, to be anxious about, but what can you do about that? You can say a prayer, you can send some Reiki, and then you have to go within yourself and try to live the best life you can live.
Yeah, which is defined by anyone who's saying it, right? Like, that means something different to everyone.
Right. Like
right?
for me, it's I've always been a big picture person. So, this is why I started the podcast. It's because people need information and they want to hear what other people have been through. And it's a learning experience. And holistic healers need to put it out there, or people who've experienced healing need to put it out there. So, that's why I do what I do. I don't expect everybody to be like me. I know some people want to just live off the grid and, do their thing. So do your thing, whatever you're called to, do that.
Yeah, and don't let what other people have said or even shown you be, because life is so fluid and malleable in a lot of ways. Like, we feel stuck, but if you look around, everything is happening. You can really do anything here. And we all have a little bit of trials and obstacles, or we all have our unique challenges. But like, the world is our oyster, like they say, and you can do whatever you want to do.
Right. If you live by other people's standards, you're never going to be happy.
Never.
So you need to do what you want to do. Are there any other Reiki practitioners or shamanic practitioners in my family? No. Are there anybody else starting podcasts? No. But you just got to do what you feel called to. And then the universe gives you information back. Like this podcast, I've had an overwhelming response for guests on this podcast. So to me, that's a yes, green light, keep going.
Correct. Yeah.
And even if I didn't have a big response, that doesn't mean give up. Sometimes you just stick with something and it ends up being successful.
Right. And that's comes the difference is if this is something that you like to do and you feel like you're making a change, or you feel like this podcast thing could be something that other people are doing. So I'll just do it too. And then you'll never have any passion or drive behind it. And if it doesn't work out, you'll just quit, but it wouldn't be for you. You're doing it to put it out there. I noticed from the shame and vulnerability when I first just started going out and talking to people, like those things would open people up. Right? Like, people aren't used to that either. Like people aren't used to people being vulnerable in certain ways, and people talking about shameful things. And I find that when I do, people then start sharing more, and you can see change happen right away in people. And I was talking to my cousin one time, and I'm my cousin my whole life, and we were talking about something, and he's like, Tim, what did you just do to me? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I just feel like 10,000 pounds came off me. He's like, I never experienced such a thing. Now, we all heard about that, right? Like, I felt like a weight was lifted off to me. But he had never in his life experienced anything like that. And all I did was allow him, right, to be open, and through me being open. And when I did, I mean, he's thanking me left and right. And we just had a conversation. But it was just allowing him to be vulnerable in a safe place and release something that he had been holding on to. And that goes back to all this stuff. We are all just holding on to these past problems like we want them, but we do not want them.
Yeah, you gave him the gift of holding sacred space, a safe space for him to be himself. That's a gift that we can give anybody.
To think that he had never heard that before, to me was even surprising, because, like I said, we had good people all throughout our family, but that doesn't mean that those people were open. And through vulnerability and shame, that doesn't mean any of those things. We still had, just like everybody else, societal rules or whatever. Like my pop, he never cried. Like a lot of people never cried, and males never cried.
Yeah, my dad, I remember him crying once my entire life, and his best friend had died.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only time. I never saw him even tear up or anything.
Yeah, and to hear that sounds painful.
Yeah.
Painful.
Well, he's not alive anymore. He passed away a long time ago.
There's probably a lot of people out there just like that. I know there is, and they don't even know the pain that they're in at not being able to, because you think as a human to be able to go through life and not cry at all, what that really means, right? That means that you've been feeling things and you just choke them down.
Mm-hmm.
Just bypass that, and the suffering comes from there. Like that's where suffering comes from. You don't even know it. I didn't know it. So my own personal observations are what I see as far as people really struggling with just not sharing and trying to be strong. And it's odd, because how much strength does it take to cry as a man in front of people who might judge you? Way more strength than it takes to hold it down, right? And then I have none of the negative benefits.
Or even what you mentioned earlier about sharing what you're ashamed about, that takes a lot of bravery.
It does. And it's still not easy, right? Because shame is shame, right? And we do things as people what we wish we wouldn't have done, bring shame and regret and everything. But how are you going to get over that if you don't talk about it, bring it into awareness? And then once it's in awareness, it's much easier to not continue doing those type of things, instead of acting out of traumas. Because a lot of times, when you act out of traumas, you don't even know you've done something until you did it. Like the thing happened, you're like, oh man, I did it again.
Mm-hmm.
I think that comes back to with being present. And I think emotions is a part of being present. Like something's happening, there's a response happening right now, and ultimately you decide to delay that or stop it, and it does, and in a bad way though. And if you just feel and you let it happen, it's happened, reaction happened, and move through you. You can move forward. You can evaluate it as from a place of already kind of have dealing with it. You know what I mean? And I kind of have hope for like the younger kids. Like my youngest daughter is 15, and their age, they're much more emotional and accepting in a lot of ways than it was when I was a kid. So, and then in a weird way, they also are more recluse. But it's going to be interesting to see. I hope for them, right? I hope for them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Tim, I want to thank you for coming on and being vulnerable with us and talking about the importance of releasing your feelings, knowing what they are. And if you want to get in touch with Tim, I'll have his info in the show notes. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tina. I appreciate you.